means you have something happening called saturation clipping. It means you've moved the saturation up so high that you're losing detail in the most colorful areas of your picture. And that's generically known as saturation clipping. The only problem is it's not going to show up as easily here in Lightroom as it would in Camera Raw. The reason for it is a technical reason. And for those of you that are into technical stuff, I'll describe that. For you, those of you not into technical stuff, turn your brain off for a second and come back to me in a second. Your images have something called a color space attached to them. You've probably heard of a few of them. One is called sRGB, another is called Adobe RGB, and another is called ProPhoto RGB, and there are others. Those choices determine what the range of colors you can have. They determine what is the most saturated colors you can make in your photograph. sRGB is the smallest, meaning the most limited. Adobe RGB is medium. ProPhoto RGB is huge, meaning you can create colors so vivid that you can't print them or see them with your eyes. But theoretically, they're more colorful than the other spaces. And this bar chart would need to reflect what color space you end up in order to accurately show you if you're losing detail in the highlights or shadows. In Camera Raw, it does show you based on the color space you're going to end up with. But this histogram, to the best of my knowledge, does not. It shows you in the color space that is used internally in Lightroom, and it makes it so it's less useful. So turn your technical brain, your non-technical brain back on. Imagine I never said any of that. And now let me describe how this can be useful. If, when you've adjusted an image, you glance at the histogram, and on either side you see a tall, colorful spike, not a gray spike, but a colorful one, it means that you're losing detail most likely in the most colorful part of your picture, and possibly because of how high you've moved the saturation slider. If you bring the saturation slider down when you have those spikes, you'll probably find the spike to go away eventually. You can see where it's happening within your picture to see if it's an important area, so you can evaluate it and see, is that critical that I'm losing detail? And if so, you might decide to not make your image quite as colorful because you wouldn't lose as much detail. Here's how you can see where it's happening. If the spike is on the left side, you want to go to the black slider. If the spike is on the right side, you want to go to the white slider. So in this case, I don't have a spike on the right, so I don't need to go to the white slider. It's on the left, and so that means I want to go to the black slider. And we're going to use the exact same exact same feature that we used previously that shows us where things have turned black. In this time, instead of looking at areas that are black, we're going to look for colors. And in this case, I'm actually not seeing much. Let me bring up my saturation further to make it really happen and see if I can get it to happen. It's still not showing me. And this is where Lightroom is less than ideal than Camera Raw and Bridge. If I was doing this adjustment in Camera Raw, I would start seeing large areas of color showing up, and I would be able to back off on the saturation to try to avoid it. But here in Lightroom, I can't for most images. So how does that affect you? Well, if you see spikes on the ends of your histogram that are colorful, you might want to look closely at the most saturated areas of your image and see if they actually have detail, or if instead they look like a flat color. If they look like a flat, solid color that has no detail, consider moving your saturation down and see if any detail comes back. But you're going to see it more after you open the image in another program, because that's when it gets converted into your final end result, and that's when it would really show up. If you're using, though, Camera Raw, you can see it. And that's what one thing I really wish they would change in Lightroom, is make it so we can see it when we've oversaturated. So that was semi-useful information. It depends on if you use all Lightroom or also Camera Raw. Let's see what else. Let's see if I can get it to happen. I don't know if I will. In Camera Raw, I would. Okay, do you see the